everyone. We are going on for real. It's Lisa with Been There, Got Out. Sorry for my stuffy nose. I had surgery yesterday and in my sinuses, and I just sound like I have a head cold, but I don't. It's just from the surgery. But anyway, we didn't want to cancel today's interview because we planned it for quite a while, and I have to give boss lady, known as Angie from Canada, the credit for today, which she gets a lot of credit for a number of our guests because she introduces me to the most incredible people, including Alex, who is the person that is the spotlight today. Alex is also from Canada, and I don't see her yet, but she has this she's got this incredible story, and I think I'm actually just going to let her introduce herself instead of me reading it. Hi. All right, we're going to just do this. And hi, Angie. We can't get you on here, but like I said, Angie gets all the credit for this one.
Angie, I'm sorry. I don't know.
I know. Just keep typing, Angie, and asking questions. All right, so Alex, why don't you introduce yourself, because you've got this extraordinary story, and I know a lot of people say I've got this amazing story, and people do, but yours is really, really extreme, and you've done a lot of public speaking about it. So tell us who you are and what you're going to talk about today, and then let's talk about how you got yourself into this, which is usually like a bad question to ask a victim, but I think it has like a flip side.
I love it, and I want to answer it so that maybe I can help people not get into it.
Exactly.
My name is Alexandria Shaw. I am up here in the Great White North, Canada. I'm here today to talk to you guys about how I got involved in the gang subculture, how I got pulled into it, the years following it, how I got out, and the impact it had on my family and friends, and where I'm at now. And I get to do this up here frequently and talking to youth, and I'm hoping that somebody can take something away from it that'll either help them or help somebody they know. So
I'm sure you can, and I'm so glad that you're talking about, from your own perspective. But one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later in this interview is how your family was affected by it. And I know that we also are contacted often by family members who are so concerned with their sons and daughters who are in these dangerous relationships, and they just feel so helpless. So maybe you can share a little bit about that in a few minutes. But first, again, that awful, wonderful question, how did you get yourself into this? Like, you have a different sort of background with your family that I think people would think she would never. How did this happen to her?
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody knows I came from upper middle class. Both my parents are still together today. I grew up on a farm in southern Ontario. I rode horses most of my life, like most of my youth, up until I was about 13. It took up the majority of my life, probably 7 days a week, multiple times a day. And I was competitive, and one day I got kicked out of the barn I was riding for, and it broke my heart. And I just didn't know who I was anymore, and I lost my sense of identity, and I had no idea where I was going in life, because I always thought I was going to be this like Olympian, and that was going to be my life. And when I got kicked out, the person that kicked me out of the barn was like a parent figure to me. So it hurt so bad that I couldn't go on riding horses at that time. And I started hanging out with the wrong crowd, trying to figure out who I was. And I just wanted people to think I was worthy.
Yeah. How old were you, Alex, at this time, like when you got kicked out of the horse life?
I was 11 or 12, I would say, maybe even 13, maybe 13.
So beginning of adolescence, that's like a really hard time. I used to teach high school. I know adolescence is a hard period, and everyone's struggling with identity. And here you have this very stable, solid existence, and then it was just completely blown apart.
Yeah, so it happened the year so I could have my age wrong. It happened the year like Labor Day weekend going into grade 9. That's when it happened. So it was just like the worst time for that to have happened, because I was still going into this new school with all these new people, and all you want is to be accepted, and I had just lost everything who I thought I was going to be. So fast forward, I ended up going to a high school party with the wrong crowd when I was about 15. I was sexually assaulted by multiple people at this party. Uh, um, at the time, I didn't know what had happened. I woke up the next morning and I just knew something was wrong. My mom picked me up. We went home. She asked me if I wanted to go to the hospital. I said, no, I just want to go home. We did. And when I went to the bathroom, there's just blood everywhere. So, and then I said, like, I got to go to the hospital. They did a sexual assault kit on me. Um, and then I went to the police, but I had been roofied. So I didn't know what exactly had happened to me. I just knew that I hurt and that something had happened. And the sexual assault kit did indicate that there was trauma. So when I went to the police, I was 15. I was terrified. I was hurt. That was my first sexual experience. So the police officer, and it wasn't his intention, I didn't know that now, but what he had said to me was, if you are found to be lying, you could potentially be charged. And at 15, with everything I had going on, I was so scared and I couldn't remember what had happened. So I did not proceed with charges. I never sought out appropriate mental health or psychological support for what I had been through. And that was kind of it. I started drinking heavily. I started smoking a lot of marijuana.
Okay, pause. Alex, what about your family at the time? I always interrupt people, but like, your family found out this happened to their teenage daughter, or did they not know? Was it not communicated when it happened? What was their response to hearing when it happened?
So all through high school, like ever since I got kicked out of the farm, I had always been like a troubled kid. I never really was pleasant to be around. I always had like a pretty big chip on my shoulder, and then this happened, and I told my mom. Like, my mom went to the hospital with me, and she was there through that whole process. And it was horrible for her because she just watched me and I just sat there and cried the whole time.
Yeah.
So she let my dad know what had happened, and my dad, like, we just couldn't talk about it. Like, that isn't something that my parents grew up with, nor is it something they taught me about. Like, it just wasn't something that was in our circle or in our life. Any sort of violence like that, or an invasion of your self, essentially.
Yeah.
So
nobody really talked about it.
yeah, like they had tried to set me up with our family doctor, to see if I could get support, and I just couldn't. I wasn't there. I didn't want to talk about it. I was ashamed because I couldn't remember it. I just knew that what the kid had said and how I had felt, and that's all I really had to go on. So if the police at that time, in my mind, they didn't believe me, why would I talk to anybody another adult who isn't going to listen?
Right. So, and not just that they didn't believe you, but they threatened with retaliation when you couldn't even remember.
Yeah.
Which makes it extra scary.
Yeah. So I kind of felt alone, not because my parents made it that way, but because they didn't know how to deal with this either. They thought by having me talk to a physician, like, that would be good, but it just didn't work for me for where I was at, for my headspace at that time.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of teenagers would never want to talk about this with anybody. Yeah. They don't want to talk about just experiences they're dealing with in general, but something so extreme that it makes sense.
Yeah. And just having that, the reinforcement from police that I wasn't believed, or that was how I perceived what they were saying. It was really hard, like, to talk about it with anybody.
Well, I mean, the impression is like you did something wrong and you're going to get in trouble. So instead of like, you're the victim here, it's like, you better watch yourself. So it's like punishing almost.
Yeah. And then and I had already had confidence issues. I already didn't know who I was, and that just sort of beat me down a little more and made me kind of distrustful. And to numb that, I started drinking and smoking marijuana and cigarettes, anything I could to get that feeling of hurt and shame and anger, because there's a lot of that associated with it,
Yeah, of course.
to go away. Um, and so then I ended up meeting my daughter's father when I was 18. Um, and I got pregnant fairly quickly. And he, I, I didn't realize at the time, because again, harder drugs were not something that I grew up with or that I really knew a lot about. But he had an addiction to pills and cocaine. And I finally figured it out when I was, I think, 8 or 9 months pregnant. And so like I had moved in with him in Southern Ontario. We were living together. I ended up staying with him thinking that I could help him, that I could change him. He was quite a bit older than I was, and it just didn't work out. So I ended up leaving him when my daughter was a year and a half, I want to say. And because of his addiction, he wasn't able to see her off and on. It was either, in my mind, it had to be a get clean or you can't see her, because of how unpredictable he was. Because of his addiction, it made him quite abusive, emotionally, financially, sometimes physically, but not the extreme that I learned later on in life. So that was that part. And he cheated on me frequently. And I already had body image issues because of the sexual assault. So being cheated on and his emotional abuse did involve a lot of negativity directed towards my body. So I was pretty beaten down, and I decided I was going to go back to school. So I worked 4 jobs at the time.
With a baby.
Yeah, with my daughter. So I worked 4 jobs, and I was going to school. And I had actually decided to take police foundations, because I wanted to be the person in that interview room with teenagers like me and giving them a little more encouragement. So I was in police foundations, and through police foundations, you kind of have to get a feel for what you're going to be doing and what you might be seeing out in the field. So I decided to get a job. One of my jobs was working security, and I was working in a bar, but we also did private security for artists coming into the GTA, Toronto area, for those of you that don't know GTA. So I met him, and the first year was like the best year of my life. He told me everything I needed to hear. Like, I was beautiful. He told me that I needed to, he actually held me to a higher standard than anybody ever had. It's like, if your makeup's not right, like, you're not coming out with me. Hold yourself to a higher standard. Have your nails done. Present yourself in public. Like, you respect yourself and other people will give you respect. Told me he loved me. He continually told me how smart I was, how beautiful I was, how proud he was of me, which is every single thing that I needed to hear from somebody. Because at that time, I just wanted somebody to love me.
Yeah,
and that's what
it's interesting. Like the insidious nature there of what you said. Like, he held you to a higher standard, but your makeup had to be perfect. So I could see how it sort of blends in with like someone saying, "Well, I want you to take care of yourself. Like, I want you to value yourself more, but at the same time, like, if you don't do it this way, then what?"
And I just wouldn't be allowed to go out with him, or I wouldn't be allowed to attend events, or I wouldn't. And it was, and so to back up, he was the owner of the security club, which is how I ended up meeting him, which is how I ended up dating him. And now looking back, the things he said were huge red flags. Like, if you don't do your makeup, or you're not dressed a certain way, or your nails aren't perfect, huge red flags to me. But
it's always 20/20 hindsight.
Yeah. But at the time, to me, it was like somebody cared enough to care what I looked like. Somebody cared enough to not beat me down about what I looked like, but but have an expectation and want me to meet it. And that's what I focused on, rather than those red flags shooting up everywhere.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, to give you an idea of like how big of a hold and how much trust I put into him, because he made me feel so good about myself. We were driving across the GTA and there's probably about 7 red lights. I want to 7 or 8 red lights over the course of our drive at like 2 a.m. from one club to my house, where we were working that night, to my home. And he was like, just drive through the red lights. I drove through every single red light. I didn't stop. Like, I didn't look, I didn't stop. I was just like, okay. Like, if, and it's looking back, I'm like, how stupid can you possibly be? But I'm like, if he's putting enough faith in me and he's making me feel this good, I don't want to let him down. And it was all about not letting him down. And looking back, those little things were big tests for what was to come in a bit.
Yeah.
So during that first year, it was incredible. He took me out everywhere. He introduced me to his friends and family. And his friends from Toronto would come up to my parents' farm. We would do tours so that they could see how like a little hobby farm ran, see horses, pet the cows, the usual.
Like this idyllic thing. What did your parents think of him?
They didn't really have an opinion at the time. Like, they didn't mind him. He was very, very articulate, very intelligent, very polite. So they didn't have a lot of bad to say about him. It was just like they had seen where I'd come from with my daughter's father at the time and where he was at in his life, and how beaten down I was, and how just emotionally abusive he was to me. So to not have that, and I didn't tell them a lot of the stuff about like why my nails had to be done or why I always had to be dressed a certain way. They just knew that I had all of a sudden started becoming more confident in myself. And so they didn't see how it got there or the driving force behind that. They just saw that when I got with him, I all of a sudden started having more confidence. So they probably liked that at the time.
Or it looked like confidence.
Yeah.
But what you describe isn't really confidence. It's doing what somebody else wants you to do, even though you don't realize it at the time.
Yeah, and they never, like, I would never share that information with them. I would never share the whys of it. They just saw the pretty picture from the outside.
Yeah.
Not the dirty details.
Right. And comparing him to the last one, like, oh, this one's so much better. Like, look how together she looks.
Yeah. Yeah. So at this time, like, we're a year into it at this time, and keep in mind, his his friends know where my parents' house is. I've brought them there. They know where I live. Most of them have met my daughter, she was probably, I want to say like 3 or 4 at the time. And we were driving an artist from one area of the GTA to another to do a concert. She had just flown in from out of country, and she was supposed to do a show that night. So we were driving her across the GTA, and it was about an hour and a half drive. We got pulled over, and he received a ticket. So we got pulled over by police. He receives his ticket. He hands me the ticket to throw in the glove box. So keep in mind the artist is in the back seat. So I can't really say anything, but I look at him, and the name on the ticket was not the name I had known him by. And my heart kind of did this stop, but I didn't really understand what was going on at the time, because I was focused on getting to this concert, and I was kind of thinking, well, maybe the cop got it wrong. You're thinking all these different things, like you're not actually putting it all together at this time.
It's like that cognitive dissonance. Like, it doesn't make sense, but it must be this, and can't ever be like that he lied about his name.
Yeah, like I'm making up all these excuses because there's no way this guy that I've known for a year now and am involved with would lie to me. Like, there's no way. So we get to the hotel, everybody gets settled, and I called him on it, which was the first time I've ever actually questioned him over the course of our relationship. I'm like, who are you? Like, why is the name on the ticket different? Like, who are you? What's your name? What's going on here? Because now I've had time to think about it.
Yeah.
And I literally said it to him like that. But it was the first time I had questioned him. And he physically assaulted me to a point where I was unrecognizable. There was blood on the ceiling. The duvet was covered in blood. There was blood like all over the blinds. My eyes were swollen shut. Most of my ribs were broken on both sides. I had bruises like in my ears from how bad. At one point I was knocked unconscious and woke up and it was still going on. So I don't actually know how long the assault happened. And I woke up the next day, like I couldn't open my eyes really. And I was just in so much pain.
And this is from asking him, who are you? Because he got a ticket with a different name on it.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you question his reality or the reality that he presented to you?
Yeah. And so the next day I had to spend another night in this city. And I can't really open my eyes enough in the morning to like do anything. I can't look at a phone. Like I can barely move because of the pain I was in. And then he's the one that's taking care of me. And he's sorry. And he doesn't know what came over him. And he's just so apologetic. And now he's trying to like put ice on my eyes. And he's trying to like put me into the shower so like he can wash off because my nose was like broken and just I was a big bloody mess essentially. So now I'm stuck with him for another at least 24 hours, and over that 24 hours he's the one that's nursing me back to somewhat human.
Yeah, and that cycle too of like he caused the destruction and then he swoops in as like, I'm going to help take care of you, I'm going to be the savior.
Yeah. So he kept saying he doesn't know what came over him. And I kind of got trapped into it again. And I went home and I'd never seen my dad cry before. And he actually cried because I was so broken. And it was then that I started lying and trying to cover for him. So what I told everybody was that I had ended up in the bottom of a barroom brawl and I just got stomped on. And the extent of my injuries, people believed it because I was just so distorted. Like part of my face kind of is still to this day like unlevel, and I've had to have like a lot of dental work done. But my family, I don't know if they believed it at the time, but they didn't indicate that they didn't. And so my parents still accepted him into the house whenever he'd come over. And it was that point that I had realized that I'm in something, I just don't know what it is. Over the next couple of months, I realized that he was actually the member of a gang in Southern Ontario, like a prominent gang in Southern Ontario, and that all the people that I had been introducing to my family and my farm, like all his friends that I had brought up, were actually gang members. And I was being groomed to traffic drugs, and there was going to be a home takeover of my parents' farm so that they could grow, use it as a grow op, essentially.
What is a home takeover? Like, what does that mean? I mean, I could think of it like, how did you, like, what did they say they were going to do?
So they were going to use my parents' farm. And usually what happens is people come in and they do a takeover of the house and the property.
How does that work? I'm just, like, I'm picturing all kinds of things.
It usually involves like violence, or somebody owes somebody something. In my case, it was going to be violence towards my parents. And they were going to either accept the fact that their house was going to be used as a grow op or consequences. And the or consequences are extreme violence.
Yeah, we're getting a question that I also was thinking, like, where was your daughter?
So my daughter, when I was okay enough to be around her, she was with me. Like when I wasn't assaulted or I wasn't healing, she was with me, or she was with my parents. So I would take her to my parents. So this is where the line comes in. I would take her to my parents and be like, oh, can you watch her for a night? And then they'd watch her for a night. And if I got assaulted or something happened, I wouldn't be able to pick her up for a couple of days. So I just wouldn't show up. I wouldn't say anything. I just wouldn't show up because I couldn't come up with enough lies, and I couldn't keep it from them. So I would just stay away. And then I would show up, I'd pick Rihanna up, and my mom would kind of just look at me like, what are you doing with your life type thing.
So here,
Not really.
your family, like your parents and your daughter's life and your own life is being threatened.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine a way out of this.
No. So this went on for a couple of years, where, I mean, the assaults weren't frequent, but they weren't always as bad as the first time, and sometimes they were way worse than the first time. So in order to get me to do certain things, violence was always kind of a part of it, or a threat. And so if I didn't do something, he would sit on me and break my fingers and toes. If like some of the assaults, I had multiple concussions, many concussions over the course of the 2 years. And there was a lot of sexual assault that occurred, which unfortunately I couldn't always hide from my daughter. But and over those 2 years, like, I stole money from my parents. I was just a really crappy human being. I pushed all my friends away. I isolated myself because I didn't want people involved. And they didn't ever equate it to really it being him, because he was so articulate and so kind, and so, like, he came across as extremely genuine when you met him, and just very well-spoken, intelligent businessman, not the guy I knew him to be. So I kept trying to distance from my parents, even just to see, like, just to try and keep them safe. And at the end of the 2 years, so there's the first year, so now we're like 3 years into this, I phoned a friend one of my best friends growing up, and his family's heavily involved in another substantial, larger gang than I was involved in. And I asked for help, and I got to live with them.
Okay, pause. So 3 years in, putting up with all this stuff, I mean, obviously, like, being completely controlled on all levels by this person. What made you finally decide to do that? I mean, to me, that's so deep into something. It's like a drowning person. Like, what made you call and ask for help at that point?
So I always thought that, so there's a ranking system, and you just work your way up in their lives, and sometimes you become their, like, number one girl, because you're never, like, he's never just with one person. And I always kept saying, like, if I can just put up with this long enough, like, maybe eventually this part of it will stop, and I'll actually be treated like a human. Because every time he assaulted me, there was always, like, the aftercare. He would always be the one that saves me. He would always be the one that, like, provided for me. Like, he helped me a lot, which was the twisted part of it, was I relied on him so much. Even if, like, the physical violence would continue, but I still needed him to help me, because I couldn't function like I used to be able to.
Yeah, what you're describing is so, I think it's really important, because people don't understand when they don't know somebody or they haven't lived through it. They'll just say, well, if that person hit you and hurt you, why didn't you just leave? But this, like, what you're articulating is just so deeply, like, it's like a perfect example of the insidious kind of coercive control. So he caused the harm, but then he was your savior, so you were so dependent on him. That's what an abuser does, is they want to make you dependent on them, And that's what he did.
And a lot of the times, like, coming from where I came from, where I didn't have a lot of confidence, and I never thought I was worth it, and I never thought I was worthy of anything. He would blame the assaults on me, and I would believe that. Like, if you had just done what you were supposed to do, you're a smart girl, why can't you figure it out? And it would get flipped around on me. And I'd be like, well, I guess so. But I was used to traffic drugs throughout the GTA. And for those 2 years, that's what I did. I would fight it off as long as I could, because it wasn't something I ever wanted to do or ever saw myself doing, or it just wasn't me. It's not my background. It's not how I grew up. And so I would fight it, and that's when the extreme assaults would happen. And the last time it happened, he's a bigger guy. He picked me up by my throat and he dropped me onto my back, on my head, onto a cement floor. And he knocked me unconscious. And when I came to, he had said, oh my God, I thought I killed you. I don't know what I was going to tell the police. And then he said, you're effing lucky you woke up, because I had no idea what I was going to tell the police.
I mean, that statement alone, I thought I killed you. First concern is I didn't know what to tell the police. Not a smidgen of concern for you, your health, anything. Yeah. Just like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah. And that was the most eye-opening, this is never going to end. And the only way it's going to end is if I'm dead. And that's when I went to my friend to see what they could do to help me. And so I was able to live with them, and it kind of put me in a spot where I was like, I'm not bragging when I say I was untouchable. I wasn't worth a fight that it would cause between the two different gangs. So I wasn't involved with the other gang, like the gang that I lived with. It just so happened that I was really good friends and had a family friend that kind of took me in. And
so you basically were saved by one gang from another gang.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost seems like, what other choice would you have to protect yourself?
Yeah.
Your daughter and your parents.
Like I never had to do anything for the other gang. It was a really, like, I grew up with him from the time we were kids. I knew his whole family. Like it wasn't like I wasn't working for them, but I don't suggest anybody else do it because my situation was different. I had grown up with these people, and they were like, because of my situation, it was a friendship. It was asking for help from a friend, and it was provided in a way that I was able to get out. But if I think the average person tried to do that, you would be jumping from one fire into an even hotter burning fire, because usually that's the way it would work.
Well, I think like it's transactional, you know.
Yeah, and just in my case, it didn't end up like just because of my personal relationship with this person, it wasn't a transactional thing. It was strictly so that I could keep my daughter and I and my family okay. So when we did,
I was gonna say, Alex, can you describe a little, like, people picture gangs as like motorcycle, rough, like what was it like living with a gang, like the gang that helped you? Because I know there's one thing you said where you're like, well, we played Scrabble.
We did. Like it wasn't like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, because I don't know what actually living, like going to one of their houses, like their party houses would have been like. I don't know what that's like, but living with them in their family environment, which is what I got to do. We played Scrabble, we cooked dinner, everybody was in bed by 10. Like there was children in the house. There wasn't drugs, there wasn't guns in that house, there was nothing in that house. It was a family home.
Yeah.
And if I was being, because there were times throughout like when I had been able to extricate and I was living with this in this house, that I would be followed by him, that I would go.
Your ex in the other thing. Yeah.
That I would go to like one of the gang's home, like the gang is not like their family home, just to get him off my tail. And that sort of helped back him off, like, and realize that it wasn't just this house that was protecting me. It was, I was protected because I'm friends with them. But again, I don't necessarily love telling that part of the story because I'm always worried people think that's a viable option. I really want them to know it's not. My case was just so different.
Yeah.
Because of growing up with them and stuff like that, that it was an option for me, but it's not an option for everyone else. And the question I often get is, why didn't you go to police? Like I hear that so often. And he convinced me that he had police on his payroll. And I know that I, I don't believe that to be true now. But at the time, like I was scared. What happens if do I want to call his bluff and find out he wasn't lying?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and even if I get rid of him, like there's so many other people involved in this now. So I didn't end up going to police, and there weren't the organizations available now that assist people in my situation. And there wasn't the funding available to assist people like me back then. So that's why I took the route I did. There was just, to me, no other option to keep myself, my daughter, and my family safe.
Yeah. So your family during this time when you were living with the other gang, the friend, what was their impression? Like, what did they think?
They up until very recently, like a couple of years ago, they actually had no idea how in depth I was like into it. They knew that I had lived. They thought that it was an abusive relationship gone south, and that I had just moved in with, because they knew the people that I grew up with too. They knew them because I went to school with them. They'd be at my house every weekend. Like they thought I had just moved in to a house,
Right.
not realizing it was so.
Yeah.
It was so pertinent to
Right.
at that point.
Yeah. So, so after this, you tell us how you left, how you actually got away from that, and now into your career, because it's really different.
So I stayed down there for a couple of years, and I just realized I was never going to be. I stayed in Southern Ontario for a while, and I just realized I was never ever going to be able to move on. I was always going to be looking over my shoulder. I was always there. The fear was always there. So I packed up and I moved 17 hours away. And now I actually, to be honest, didn't realize there was a name for what I had gone through. I didn't realize that I had been trafficked. I didn't even know anything about it. I just knew that I had lived this insane experience. When I got to Thunder Bay, I had never actually sought out help for what I had been through. So I started volunteering a lot because I knew I needed to help people. So I volunteered with the fire department here. I started volunteering with victim services. And through victim services, I started helping survivors of human trafficking. And then I started helping members that were caught up in gangs that were being brought up here, and trying to help them out as well. And I would meet them through victim services, and I would connect them with different organizations. And one of those organizations is Engage 416, which is actually how I ended up being introduced to Angie and and all those guys. And that's where my story of being able to talk about this comes in, because I actually learned that I was trafficked. I learned the terminology, and I learned that because of my experience, I can actually talk to people of those very violent crimes a little bit easier than maybe somebody that's been to school for it or just is in the job for it. And I'm not taking away from an education or anything, but I think my life experience allows me to reach a level of understanding with those survivors and be able to help them a little more.
Yeah, I mean, you're like the epitome of our company name, been there, got out. Like, you are a role model of somebody who went through this extraordinary experience and came out on the other side and then some.
Oh, thanks. I try. I think now I was the vice chair for Crime Stoppers. I was with Boots on the Ground, which is actually a peer support for first responders up here, because I believe there are gaps in our system that make it difficult for victims and police to communicate on a level that they can both understand each other and appreciate where each other's coming from. So I was volunteering with that, and I'm a 911 dispatcher for ambulance. And that's what I get to do now.
Yeah.
As well as
So
talk to
go
people.
ahead.
Yeah, as well as get to talk to youth and people through in Toronto. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure they trust you more because you speak from experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Incredible.
I always hope that people can take away that your situation today isn't necessarily where you have to be tomorrow. And there's always a way, and there's so many organizations to help you get out of where you're at. It doesn't matter what it is or how deep into it you are. There's always somebody that can reach and pull you out if you are willing to put the work in. So
Yeah. So let's talk about that and go into the part about family. So let's say it's you or it's somebody else and they have a family member that I mean, with your family, they didn't know a lot of what was going on.
yeah.
But a lot of our people there, they see it's obvious, it's more overt, where their adult child is in a toxic, dangerous relationship. Like, what advice could you give parents or loved ones who see this and just feel so helpless?
I'm a strong advocate for loving someone where they're at. And that's probably one of the hardest things you could ever do, because people, their nature is to reach in and want to grab and pull people out of whatever situation they're in. There's nobody in this world that would have been able to grab and pull me out before I was ready. I had to come to terms with it. I had to make my plan. I had to do the legwork because I knew all the moving parts and I knew how hard it was going to be. So my parents, even if they had known, and even if they had been like, well, we'll just do this, you can come and stay with us and blah, 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 just get out of it, just leave. And people who say just leave, you don't know all the moving parts that are happening and how dangerous just leaving can potentially be, not only for myself, but for everyone around me.
Right.
So
Right.
huge advocate for love them where they're at. And that means not necessarily trying to be the hero and reaching in and pulling them out then, but gather your resources, because eventually that person is going to want help. It may not be today, and you have to accept that. And that's really hard because people are like, well, you're in a bad situation, just get out. And they want to help you, which is human nature. But that's not always feasible to somebody in that situation. So love them where they're at, provide support. That doesn't mean you have to be like financially responsible for them or anything like that, but love them, support them, tell them that you love them, and gather resources, because when they are ready, you will be prepared. And you can say, this organization can help you. This person can help you. This is what we have ready for you when you're ready.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about also was how, like you mentioned that when you were involved with this, you were lying to your family and you were stealing. A lot of parents experience that too. How could you love someone who's lying and stealing? Like, how could you protect yourself as a family member when you have somebody that you care about who's treating you terribly, who you can't trust for whatever reason, but it's happening?
It is hard. The lying is that's part of loving them where they're at, and that's like one of the hardest parts, because you want to call them on their lies, but they're lying to you for a reason. Whatever it is, don't try and guess, because you'll drive yourself nuts, and it'll build a understand that whatever they're doing right now, they aren't ready for the help you want to provide, and they're going to lie to you to get whatever they want from you. Be prepared for that. Don't ask too many questions. Don't dig. Just, okay, I love you, and I'm here for you when you're ready to have a real talk.
Hard.
It is a hard ask, and it's a hard tell for parents, because you want to call your child. You want them to do good. You want your friends to do better. You want to see them succeed. And until they're ready to succeed, you can't force them. And that's the hardest thing, I think, about knowing somebody in my situation or anything like this, is that I lied relentlessly. I stole all the time. And I wish I could go back and tell my parents what was happening. But at the time, I just was so scared for them and myself. So,
Yeah. How have they come to terms with who you were versus who you are now?
I think they're proud of me now. I think so. When I came out with my first podcast, I had never actually spoken to most of my family about it because to me it was to me it, I don't want to say it wasn't a big deal, but it's something that I went through and I lived through, and now I get to go and talk to people about it. But to me, it's just part of my life. And so I never really spoke in depth about it to many people. There was friends and family that saw it when it was happening, like when I got out and stuff. And there's really close friends that knew the entire time, but I never really spoke to my parents about it because it just wasn't how I grew up, and I didn't want to embarrass them, and I didn't want them to feel like it was an excuse for what I had put them through. So when I released the first podcast back, I think in 2021, um, my brother phoned me and he was like, "Hey, do you have a second?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I watched your podcast," and he just started crying. And I'd never heard my brother cry before, and I was like, mad, like what's going on? And he's like, "I always thought you were just an asshole." Sorry for the French, but there it is. That verbatim what he said. I just thought you were an asshole. None of us ever knew how bad it was. And he was like heartbroken for me. So now I've gotten to rebuild relationships that were not great because they all thought I was just this really, I think they thought I was an addict, and I never had any addictions back, like when that was going on. I didn't have anything. So but I think that's what they believe because I lied so much, and I stole all the time. So I think that was their perception. And now I've gotten to rebuild with my parents, and I've gotten to rebuild with my brother, my cousins, and some of my friends too. So now they have a better understanding of why I did the things that I did.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. I'm just keeping an eye on the time because we only have a few more minutes. But can you talk a little bit about your daughter? What's going on with her after everything you've been through?
She is this incredible, phenomenal human being. I think if you were to ask, and that's not just me being a mom bragging, I'm genuinely proud of the person she is. We openly talk about all of this, how it's impacted her, because she was there for some of the sexual assault stuff. So recognizing that she's going to need supports for that, but she is so driven to she wants to become a psychologist. She works every single day, like 7 hours on homework just to make sure she gets it.
Wow, how old is she now?
She's 16. So she went out, she got her driver's license. She's part of Sea Cadets here. She's just so responsible that, like, she's probably more responsible than I am most of the time.
Yeah. What's it like for you? Because she's the age that you were in the midst of this awful, I mean, beginning, almost like sort of at the beginning, the early part.
Because I've been so honest with her, and because she lived through some of it with me and she has memories of it, I don't worry about that with her. I do see it with her friends, and I see how their self-confidence and how easily accessible people are on the internet now. I see that, and that's terrifying. So sometimes I try and talk to some of her friends, but I don't worry about that with her. And I know that she always talks to her friends openly about it too, so that they know, like the understanding is you may not be able to stop somebody from getting into it, but you can give them enough resources to get out when they're ready.
Yeah.
And that's what I've provided her. And I hope that she provides it to others as well, but I don't really worry about that with her because she's so dedicated to not having that happen to her.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you go through the terrible experiences, but sometimes, you know, your kids come out the better in different ways because of the awfulness that happened in the past.
Yeah, it's like an fortunate circumstance,
right?
I guess, that we had to go through what we went through to get to where we are today.
Yeah. Okay, so how can people find you or help or anything? We've got like a couple more minutes.
Find me on Instagram. I can send you my email, and people can always email me. I add me on Instagram anytime. I will always help whoever I can help. I'll always talk to whoever I can talk to help them or give them hope. Or if you know somebody that's going through something and you want me to chat with them, or you want me to be a resource when they're ready to get out, I have no problem ever doing anything like that.
That's awesome. You have connection to all kinds of other resources too.
Yeah. Huge advocate for victim services and you know, sexual assault centers, abuse centers. I don't know what you have in the States, but give me a person, tell me an area, and I will research everything.
Awesome. Well, I want to before I even thank you, I got to thank Angie for introducing us and bringing you on here, because your story, I think, is going to help a lot of people.
I hope so. I really hope. Thank you, Angie.
Yeah. Sorry, my nose has been so awful, but we made it through.
You survived. I'm so proud of you.
All right, Alex, let's stay in touch, and thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, guys. Thank you for listening.
Bye.